Hey, all praise to the Most High. Hey, we back with another video, man. So we still addressing this post right here that the brother posted on his social media page. So we're gonna address the second point that he made about Mark 7. He says, did he not literally declare all foods clean? And the verses that he quoted was Mark 7:18 through 19. So let's take a look to see what's going on in Mark chapter 7. So in Mark 7, contextually, it's literally talking about eating bread with unwashed hands. Let's prove that. Verse number 2. And when they saw, meaning the Pharisees, some of the disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashed hands, they found fault. Right? So that's literally talking about, that's contextually what this chapter is starting off with and what this chapter is talking about. Watch this. Which again was a tradition of the elders, right? Of the high men of some of the Jews around that time. And the Pharisees was finding fault in the disciples for doing that. Let's read about it in verse 3. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands off, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. So the Pharisees were holding the traditions of the elders for eating bread with unwashed hands, but and finding fault with the disciples for doing that, right? So now Christ called the Pharisees hypocrites and told them that they would rather keep the traditions of men instead of God's commandments, which again most of our people do today. Let's read about it. Verse number 6. He answered and said unto them, this will be Christ, will have Isaiah, which is the prophet Isaiah, prophesied of you, hypocrites, as it is written. Where is it written? Isaiah 29:13. This people honoreth me with their lips, but with their heart is far from me. Meaning these people have good lip service, right? People say they love God, right? But when it comes to doing what God obeyed them to do, they don't do it, right? Watch this. In verse number 7, it says, howbeit in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men, right? So the commandments of men that Christ was referring to was eating food with unwashed hands, eating bread with unwashed hands. That's not a commandment of God. That was some of the traditions that the Pharisees and some of the Jews held to, that they were trying to find fault in the disciples for not doing it. Watch this. Verse number 8, it says, for laying aside the commandments of God, ye hold the traditions of men, as the washing of pots and cups and many other such like things you do. Verse number 9. And he said unto them, full well you reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your own tradition. So contextually, that is what this is talking about in Mark chapter 7. Now let's go and read the verse that the brother brought out. Right. So I want to make this clear. Christ a lot of times spoke in parables. So what we're about to read right here is what you would call an allegory, right? So I'm going to read it really quick. It says, let me see where I want to start. What verses did the brother quote? Verse 18. I'm going to read it real quick. And he said unto them, are ye so without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into a man, it cannot defile him? Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. So again, this is what you would call an allegory. What is Christ talking about right here? Again, Christ spoke in parables a lot. Some of what he said can be, he's making comparisons to things. So watch this. I want to explain to you, what goes in a man doesn't defile him, but what comes out of it does. So what it's referring to is a man's actions or a woman's actions, adultery, fornication, murder, theft, etc. He explains that in the next few verses. Let's see, verse number 20. And he said, that which cometh out of a man defile him. Again, that's what's come out of a man defiles him. What things are those? For from within, out of the heart, which the heart is compared to your mind in the scriptures, right? For within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adultery, fornication, murders, theft, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these things come from within and defile the man. So that's what this is talking about. Again, verse 23 is the point that he was making. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. They're not telling you that you can now eat pork. They're not telling you that you can now eat bottom feeders. No, those laws were prohibited in the book of Leviticus, the 11th chapter. He's not telling you to break the commandments of God. Again, I'm going to read this again in verse number 9. And he said unto them, full well, you reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your own tradition. So Christ was making a point of calling them hypocrites, because you're pushing these customs and these traditions that you have made up of eating food with unwashed hands, which is not a commandment of God, that you may keep your own traditions. So they was rejecting the commandments of God to keep their own traditions. And that's what Christ was showing them, that they are hypocrites. And it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out of a man that defiles him. And he listed those things there below. Right. So we're going to move on. Right. So we're going to address Acts, the 15th chapter. Right. The book of Acts, the 15th chapter. Right. Watch this. Acts the 15th chapter. So the brother said, wasn't it confirmed in the early church in Acts the 15th chapter that you can now eat pork? Okay. I don't see that nowhere in Acts 15, but let's see. Let's see. We could be missing something. So now Acts 15 is going mainly into circumcision, right? Okay. So some of the high priests and Pharisees were trying to put a heavy burden on the Gentiles for them to be circumcised after the manner of Moses, which is impossible anyway, because they would have to be circumcised on the 8th day, right? And these were grown men, right? It's also telling the Gentiles to stay away from food sacrificed to idols, eat nothing with blood in it, or strangled, to avoid fornication. In a nutshell, what they were doing is teaching repentance. I'm going to go into that in my next video. We're going to go through Acts 15, hit some of the main points that that a lot of so-called Christians like to go to. And we're going to see is what's going on here, allowing or giving the allowance to be able to eat foods that were outlawed in the so-called Old Testament. Hey, this your brother Mathanya. Hey, peace and blessings.